Hey guys, it's M, and today we're going to be doing something I didn't expect to do. Talk about a character I've already covered. And unfortunately, it ended up being about the shittiest name. Now, I wouldn't normally do this. However, out of every single character that I've talked about so far, the most vocal response I've gotten was about not Dio over here. So now that I'm a bit older and a little wiser, I thought it would be fun for both of us to see if my thoughts have changed on it. I'll also bring up a few little things about his arc in general since I had to reread all of that in preparation for this. To start, we should probably talk about what I said in my last video. Because truth be told, the way people were talking to me about it at times, I thought that I opened the video and it sounded like this. Fuck this character! When I see him, I want to waterboard him. I want to grab his fat fucking head and stomp on him. And if you like him, your days are numbered. Because I'm skinny with my fucking teeth. But in reality, to be honest, it was kind of a softball video, if anything. And I had three main points about him. I hated the way they tried to make us feel sympathy for him at the literal end of his story, and I wish they just made him have a death like Jaggy because it felt forced to me. I thought they focused on his past for too little, and we never got a guidance or anything solely based on his childhood. Finally, and somewhat connected to my last point, most of the side material we get about him is focused on his heartless bastard side, or did literally nothing for him as a character. And whenever I'd end up talking about this video that I made, the combos made me feel like I opened it up and started saying slurs, but those were my main points. So let's just cover those, expand on them a bit, and go into some newer things I feel for him. For the I hated his sympathy wedged in at the end of the story point, I've gotten to quite a few conversations about this, and overall, I still somewhat agree with my past self here. It's not as forced as I made it out to be before, but I can still definitely see where I was coming from. He's basically an anti-powerhouse for most of the chapters he's in. Then he's stabbed in the leg and an entire new angle of his character appeared. It's not peak fiction or anything, but it gets the job done. And narratively, this is probably when it makes the most sense for him to talk about it, as feelings were high for practically everyone there. Souther just tortured and killed his best friend as civilians watched on horrified. Ken just lost his friend, and the kid who stabbed Souther in the leg knew he couldn't stop him, but out of pure emotion did it anyway. So I'm sure that his stoic emperor mask was somewhat cracking at this point, with some of those emotions he buried welling up. Now, me coming to this realization doesn't mean I think it's all sunshine and rainbows or anything like that. If anything, it made my feelings a bit more complicated. I'm gonna say it again and probably get in trouble for the second time. I would have preferred if Souther stayed a heartless asshole to the end. I'm not shaking and quaking about the way he is in the base story or anything, but it would have been cool to have one really strong villain that doesn't flip the script the second they start losing. If she was the one who brought up all this shit about his past instead of him, I'd be 1000% okay with that. Ken can still choose to give him a painless death after hearing about it all, and perhaps instead of crying and thinking back on Ogai, when he crawls up to him, he doesn't understand what he's feeling and dies besides him in his last moments. As if he's thoroughly buried all his emotions and can't really understand them anymore. When I brought up I wish Souther was a ruthless monster in the past, people seem to take this as me saying, I wish he didn't even have a backstory, I wish it wasn't even sad, I didn't care. To which maybe I led those people in that direction somehow, but that isn't what I meant. I would have liked it if he just straight up changed for the Star of the Emperor, and when he dies we're left with conflicting feelings on if the way he turned out was really his fault. The way the story handles it, it gets the same kind of point across, but I feel it would have been a bit more powerful if presented the way I just described, at least for me. Then we have to talk about if I feel sympathy for him in general. And no, not really. Ogai's death was sad, yeah, and I understand the whole one bad day ruined his life aspect, but considering the child enslaving and murdering and regular enslaving and murdering, cutting his old best friend's leg and forcing him to walk up a pyramid, causing Shu's son to commit sewer slide to save Ken, poisoning kids, I'm kinda good on that. The Nantos in general didn't have the best motivations for becoming psychopaths for me. For example, when you simplify it, Shin got rejected and gaslit, and Yuta fucking sucks. Sure, Souther losing his father figure is tragic, and I understand that he was his anchor, so without him he lost himself. However, the extreme extent that he goes for it all is why this backstory never really made me feel bad for him. Ray lost both of his parents and his sister was kidnapped at her wedding. Sure, he was a big meanie for a minute, but he didn't go start an empire with child slave labor. Ogai, by what we've been shown, loved Souther and showed him warmth his entire life. Even when he died, he was proud of him. I'm kinda wiggling around what I'm getting at, but my point is, it doesn't seem that bad for this universe in general, considering what some of the other characters experience. Him also being a 30 or 40 something year old man in the current story when this happened when he was like 16 or 18 doesn't help much, as he had a lot of time to adjust to that change. I'm not saying he should have just got over it by now, but again, to do all he did was a little bit wild, a little bit crazy, not gonna lie. I understand this won't bother some people, but it's hard for me to ignore. Some people kept telling me, well, you're not supposed to forgive forgive his actions because of his past, but you can feel sympathy for him while understanding why he had to go. Initially, I didn't feel this at all, and when I started to a bit but said he wasn't my favorite or anything, the argument ended up shifting into, you simply don't understand. I do. Just the cartoonish villainy really overruled it for me. He's meant to be a tragic character, and I understand why people like that aspect of him, but he doesn't make me feel much in that regard. Some people also seem to think I love Kaio for some reason, because I said I liked his backstory a little bit more when I don't. I don't feel much sympathy for Kaio either, for practically the same reasons. Just to me, it felt like Kaio lost a lot more and had a more tragic upbringing to justify himself being that way personally. Speaking of Kaio, this kind of shifts into our next point about the guidance or side material, to which I have to somewhat apologize for misrepresenting his depiction in Ken's rage. 1, not 2. Where it shows how he can't go back, but deep down wishes for it. That's pretty neat. But I'm sure you noticed a lot of my issues with this fella are at his youth. And that's the main area that I'd love to see expanded upon, as that's when he was at his most vulnerable and probably his most interesting for me. So I'd love a story to focus on that. The one chapter spinoff, like I said last time, was cool. It gave an extra element of him having a reason to hate Hokuto in general, which does change the way we can look at a few lines in the base story. Ignoring the fact that this is pretty much taken word for word, bar for bar from Kaio's backstory, it's pretty neat. But again, like I said last time, it's only one chapter. Considering all we have left after this is the fanfic story that's Ken's Rage 2 and fucking Ichigo Aiji. This was the best thing they gave him for me, and it's really short. I wish we got a story that focused solely on his childhood after Ogai's death. That's about 20-ish chapters long, but I doubt that's gonna happen. In conclusion, I feel like I'm gonna say the same shit I said last time. I like Souther, he's just not my favorite. He has the potential to be, but he just isn't. He's in one of the hypest arcs in the manga for sure, but I can't say I'm exactly enthralled with this character. My thoughts on him changed a bit from how they were before, but in the end, he's still just a cool villain for me. Not the best, far from you to I mean the worst, but he's neat. But with all that out of the way, I think I said everything I feel. What do you guys think? Is Souther one of your favorites, or is he one of the worst things to happen to the story like I apparently thought? As always, I'm glad to discuss with you guys in the comments, and I've been M, and I am out.